Good evening and welcome to Café Muse. My name is Majda Gama and I'm hosting our November Salon along with the fabulous Ellen Cole. I'm so excited to welcome everyone to the Writers Center, which is such an important home for Café Muse and for the DC literary community. Welcome as well to everyone attending on Zoom. We will continue to offer more hybrid events in the new year, so please join us in any way you can. Tonight, we welcome the poets Henry Crawford and Ethelbert Miller. I'll introduce Henry and Ellen will introduce Ethelbert. If we have time, our founder, Karen Alanier, will lead a short Q&A after the reading. We'll then break for the night so that we can talk to the poets and buy their books. Expect the reading part of the event to last about an hour. Now, I must mention that it's also election eve, so I hope that you've made plans to vote tomorrow if you haven't voted already. Good luck to us all. The next Café Muse is on Monday, December 2nd, and will also be here in person at the Writers Center. It will feature a reading of the new anthology From the Belly, Poets Respond to Gertrude Stein's Tender Buttons, Food, edited by Karen Alanier. I hope you'll join us for a night of inventive and ekphrastic wordsmithing. Now, please silence your phones, or as Henry likes to say, please place them into poetry mode. It's my huge honor to introduce the poet, Henry Crawford. Henry is someone I think of as a whole body poet, a poet so committed to the craft and to the language that it expands into all areas of his life. He has greatly benefited our local community, not just with his innovative and uniquely spiritual poems, but with his tech experience and volunteer work in the greater DC literary community. Henry delights in invention and sees tech not as competition, but as a novel way to expand the blank page and to challenge the poetic line. He is in constant dialogue with poetry. I recall him leaving a poetry workshop, already composing a poem in his head for his drive home. Imagine having that kind of relationship with your craft, that instinctive contact. In his book, The Binary Planet, now in its second edition with the WordWorks, our universe expands and contracts as it explores the reach of infinity and the gravity of human existence. It marvels at a world that is not asynchronous with computers, but uses the language of code and tech to ask more of the reader and the poet. Only Henry can write a poem about filing an auto insurance claim and make it lyrically sublime as well as humorous. I've learned so much from him over a 14-year period of workshop and friendship, because he is a fearless and curious poet, always writing from a place of deep empathy. I couldn't be the writer I am without Henry's poetry in the world. Henry Crawford is the author of 2 collections of poetry, American Software and The Binary Planet, and 2 chapbooks, The Little Box Theater and Prehistory. His poem, The Fruits of Famine, won first prize in the 2019 World Food Poetry Competition. His work has been published in Boulevard, Pumpernickel, Rattle, the Southern Humanities Review, and many others. He's a 2-time finalist for the Wurgle Flomp Humor Poetry Contest. He was nominated for the 22 Riesling Award by the Science Fiction Poetry Association. And he is a longtime co-host of the Café Muse Literary Salon online and producer of Poets versus the Pandemic during the COVID years. Please welcome Henry Crawford.
Thank you, Majda, for that wonderful, overly generous introduction. Thank you so much. And I want to thank Café Muse and the Café Muse team. You guys do such a we bring so many good poets there up to this podium. So I want to thank everybody for giving me the opportunity to read from The Binary Planet. But I'm going to start with a love poem from my young days from American Software. I'm going to start with this poem about growing up in Queens, New York, an outer borough place. This is east of Manhattan. Janie and I sat on the rocks near a dock of blackened wood. Across the water, Rikers Island drained the last of the 4:30 light. My mouth wet with a winter kiss. I licked my lips, my hands in my pocket, her pale chest breathing beneath her pink ski jacket. Her father was dead. Mine was gone. "Don't treat me like some little hua," said Jane with a scorn that made her mouth like that of a mouse. Some cold came off the water. The sun was gone, nothing but a rusty slash, growing dark over the airport. It was late. We left through a hole in the shadows. This is from Queens, from outer borough Queens. We'll go to Silicon Valley and the age of globalization. This is Santa Clara server room. It's already tomorrow in Shanghai, midnight in Palo Alto, and I'm working with Leisure Suit Larry using SQL commands on Big Iron Oracle with select statements and where clauses, searching container ships for a box gone missing in the South China Sea. It's an odd lot of Jimmy Buffett bobbleheads, 200 cases of Blu-ray DVDs, and 6 cartons of Popeye the Sailor punching bags, turned out by 14-year-old Kim, working the long shift in an orange smog Guangdong sweatshop, filling orders for a dollar store in Des Moines, as our deft fingers scour the shipping lanes, querying transactions, sorting, filtering broadband waves of structured information in climate-controlled darkness. And I'm thinking about the punching bag children, winding up their short-sleeved arms to bash their plastic foes, and the planet we're burning to make such happiness, and how that's all we ever really wanted. When out of the din of spinning discs, Larry says he's found the box at the bottom of a 1 million record database, grinning as he explains that it was just a case of a mistaken space between the pop and the I in the word Popeye. And out in the valley, the virtual night breathes easier as the world again makes sense. This next poem is a tribute to one of my favorite parts of living in this area. And as we live by farms. You know, I can ride my bicycle out to them, and I do. And this is what has inspired me to write this poem, Driving by a Farm at a Distance. I sometimes imagine waking up to a table of butter and milk, my imaginary wife, adorned in gingham. Outside, imagined animals are waiting for me to imagine them too. There might be pigs, but more likely chickens. I imagine myself putting on my farmer's suit to scatter some feed. I believe there are machines that I imagine need fixing. Heat in the heat of the day glistening on my soaked bandana. My imaginary son in the next field, old blonde cowlick, stooped over a row of young corn. Maybe he's a 4-H club hero or a desk-bound nerd who wants none of this. But there's always an imaginary dock, sometimes going out upon a useless pond and sometimes buried in the woods by a dragonfly creek. I am afraid of autumn. It is then, I imagine, the evening will appear to me, my plain wife listening to the radio, imagined music in the farmhouse air. This is the night I will stay on the dock, no one calling, lowering myself into the flotsam of leaf dust and spent butterfly wings, to fall with the stars under the surface of imaginary water. Well, one thing about this area is if you pick up a map, you look at DC, it's like this square kind of thing. As soon as I look at it, to me, I say, well, that's a great pinball table. This is DC pinball. Shot out of Fort Stevens cannon, the ball caroms up Georgia Avenue for 50 quick points off the Leisure World globe. ricocheting through the strip mall stores of Aspen Hill to spin jauntily down the Starbucks corridor of Connecticut Avenue, picking up dollars in the doorways of K Street law firms, lighting up lobbyists for cash and prizes, whirling around the tidal basin only to be trapped in Jefferson's Dome, then loosed by a flip of the Washington Monument, knocking the ball into the reflecting pool, where the poor once stood waiting for their own bonus points, at the lap of Lincoln, who kicks the ball around the outer rings of DuPont Circle, up Mass Avenue, past the navel-gazing observatory, picking up gargoyle points off the walls of the Washington Cathedral, then up the Neiman Marcus Highway of Wisconsin Avenue, past the grave of Scott Fitzgerald, before falling into the ancient waters of the Rock Creek, now flowing silently by a pickup b-ball game at Candy Cane City, untouched and gaining speed as it sails past the proud shores of P Street Beach to slip through the hands of white-gloved Georgetown, unable to make the save as the ball drops into the Potomac on its way out to the big sea that knows nothing of us. There's a darker vision of Portrait of DC in screens. There's a little bit more updates, it's got a sort of a post-COVID feel to it, but this is City of Glass. Despite the New York Avenue horn parade of Tesla and Toyotas driving semi-blind under the slant glare of September sunlight, an echo of the days of '68 still reverberates in the alleys of the squat skyline of Cashbox Towers, multiple night hotels, Smithsonian caves of geologic time, of air, and of space, of Rembrandt suddenly seeing himself old under the rectangular eyes of Mark Rothko, overseeing the cars below slowly rolling into the dark of basement garages. Fourth floor Patty, sixth floor Tom, working a whiteboard of donors plotted against possible opportunities, while shiny shoed partners fill in the blanks of untimely timesheets. And Metro Center regulars huddle around a bespoke Edward Gibbon-style profit, measuring the decline and fall of stocks, housing, the rise of gold, crypto, of Midwest cattle futures, and winter polar bears slogging the last of ice along Alaska's North Slope. Night is harder to see, better reflected off the glass of after-hours saloons and deal makers, deal closers, deal runners, and deal seekers, working under the blue moon illuminating the statue of homeless G Street Jesus, eternally wounded and infinitely asleep, while under a metro overhang, alongside her makeshift urban tent, an angry madwoman brings her conclusion to her argument against the stars. This poem is one that I will read until we're all fed. And because even as we live in this opulence that we see around us tonight, people will be starving all around the world. People will be hungry. Children will be going to bed without food. And this is the fruits of famine. On those nights, we traced the shapes of fruit until the dark became their eyes. On those nights, we left our fields on hearing the crack, broken roots, the silence of dying ground. On those nights, twilight filled the deserts of our crossing with the vermilion breath of watermelon. On those nights, the stars seeded the skies above the camp. Jackfruit guards stood still as celery stalks. On those nights, we dreamed like you, strawberry days on porcelain plates. And on those nights, I made an apple out of sand and watched it blow away. Here's that auto insurance. Here's that poem that Majda alluded to. Making an auto insurance claim from Binary Planet. My side view mirror got whacked by an unknown driver, so I called an 800 number to make a claim. And I was put on hold listening to a song with a strange xylophone solo. And they broke in every 3 minutes to thank me for my patience. I don't play the xylophone, but I was in a band called Curb Your Dog with a drummer called Nutty Chuck. He knew 3 notes on the xylophone, C, C sharp, and D. He could play them fast or slow, but we had to kick him out. So Nutty Chuck and a guy named Horse moved to California with the xylophone. And around this time, the phone was asking if I would like to take a survey at the completion of the call. After which the song with the xylophone came back. Now, there's always a tendency to account for things. My Aunt Grace, who is not my real aunt, learned to play the flute at the age of 98. I remember asking her about my mother, and as she talked, she would toot a note or two. She told my mother, toot, toot. My dad would never, toot, toot, leave his wife. So all the children, toot, 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 would be illegitimate. Toot, toot. My mother almost took her own life. Toot. When she learned she was pregnant with me. Toot, toot. Grace said, I should be grateful they didn't have abortion in those days. I tooted back. I'd be good either way. Toot to you. And now the phone began asking questions. I gave a 7 to the service rep. I gave 0 for the time on hold. I gave my mom an 8. I gave 9 to myself for being patient, and 10 for the song with the xylophone solo. This poem from Screens is, again, traces that disillusionment. This is something that you might experience yourself, probably tonight even. This is Messages from Screams. Driving off a cliff, I hear a sing-songy squeal from my phone. 5 notifications, 2 friend requests, a Facebook post, and an unanswered call. And now I need a software update. And a countdown clock is circling, waiting to start. And now a flashing message and a code red alert, too hot to be outside. I search for help, but I get an ad. It's Mayhem, who believes I need insurance, as I'm waiting to hit skip, not sure they cover cliffs. The clock now down to 5, and I'm looking for the cancel button. I got it. But now a warning, McAfee about to expire. Is it spam? Is it phishing? I hit the spam button. Do I want to unsubscribe? Yes, I do, but I need to back up my data. I'm almost out of storage. I check my voicemail. It's my boss asking, where are you today? I'm watching Netflix. It's a movie my phone thinks I'd like to see. It heard me last week listening to Pink Floyd. It thinks I'm edgy. More likely to like Pulp Fiction than The Sound of Music. It's seen me cooking. Caught me the other day reading The Wirecutter. And here's an ad for an electric air fryer. And now I'm a lucky Florida timeshare winner. My phone erupts in virtual balloons, proclaiming my prize. Music streaming in, money, it's a hit. And now the cliff, sitting front seat, Thelma on my left, Louise beside me. We join hands, nothing in front of us, borderless, boundless, suicidal lovers, slow motioning into a sky-wide canyon, and then a 30-day trial subscription to Grammarly. I have 2 more. Tomorrow, I think we all know, is a very important day in our democracy. This is a poem that kind of came out of the Trump first term. It was a honorable mention in the Moving Words Poetry Contest back in 2017. And it deals with the fact that Trump wanted to extinguish, he wanted to blot out 7 words from government documents. Those words were vulnerable, entitlement, diversity, transgender, fetus, evidence-based, and science-based. So the challenge was, could I write a poem with all 7, all 7 of them? This is the poem 7, Disappearing Words from Binary Planet. First to go were the vulnerable, with little voice and no entitlement to fairness. Next up, diversity was whited out in one clean stroke, along with evidence-based as in provable or true. Words that made people feel uncomfortable like fetus or threatened the powerful like science-based had to be deleted. Without words, you can even make a people disappear. So on a plain gray desk, a blunt red pen crossed out transgender. They were gone. Let's hope for the best tomorrow. We don't want any of that. We don't need it. We don't need it. We don't have to go back to it. So I'm going to conclude with, we started with a love poem. I'm going to conclude it with this poem, The Love Poem of an Average Man, is the final poem in the book. And I worked with my editor, Nancy White, to make a two-tone poem. It's partly gray and different shades of gray. The one panel is Gertrude Stein, actually, the language of Gertrude Stein. And the top layer is the poem that I'm going to read to you. It is a love poem. It's dedicated, it's for Gertrude Stein. And it's dedicated tonight to my long-term life partner, my soulmate, and my best friend, Teresa Crawford. This is the love poem of an average man. Take my nail-bitten hands, my oil-stained shirt, my steel-toe shoes, and let's step out onto ground that is not you, that is not me. Wear your cloth coat, plain shirt, flats. Pretend your beauty as a gun pretends its aim. This is the tumble. This is the end of fortune, throwing off our gold, bailing out a drowning boat. I need to know the window of your weeping, its thin glass. I need to know your jewel box closed for good. There was a wood floor, only the sound of rain outside. I want to sit with you there and be honest. Is there anything in the attic? Is there anything that can be had? A gray lock falling? Don't push it back. But help me gather my lost toy soldiers. I want to show you my night with its sorrowful smile, peering over the kitchen stove in the blue of a losing flame. I've seen too many afternoons to fall for yet another. So hold me in my overalls. My grime will not rub off. I promise not to be you. I want to be the outside in you. I want to be the boy and the woman and you. I want to be the girl and the man and you. I want the shelter of night and you. I want to walk dangerous with you. We wield the sharpest knives, so bleed out the wounds, expose the cuts. A river of blood is ours, for this is the tumble. There are no more rocks to hold on to. The answers have been written down and forgotten. There is something in nothing. It is possible to be someone. It is possible. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ellen Cole, one of the Café Muse co-hosts. And Henry, I want to tell you that was fascinating and wonderful. Sometimes I'd like to warm and spend a little time in your mind. I think that would be fun. Anyway, tonight it's my very great honor to introduce one of our local literary luminaries, Ethelbert Miller. He's multi-talented and highly respected by everyone in the DC area who knows anything about poetry. Miller is a literary activist and the author of 2 memoirs, more than 15 poetry collections, I don't know, 18? And 2 memoirs. He hosts WPFW morning radio show On the Margin with E. Ethelbert Miller and produces The Scholars on UDC TV, which received a 2020 Telly Award. He also writes a column for the American Book Review and is a regular on NPR. Other honors include the 2022 Howard Zim Lifetime Achievement Award by the Peace and Justice Association, which was awarded by one of my personal heroes, Congressman Jamie Ruskin. Miller was named a 2023 Grammy nominee for Best Spoken Word Poetry Album and has been awarded so many awards, I don't have time to name them all. Miller directed Howard University's African American Resource Center for more than 40 years. He has taught at American University, George Mason University, the University of Nevada, and at the writing seminars of Bennington College. He's on the board for the Institute for Policy Studies. He received a Columbia Merit Award and was honored at the White House by First Lady Laura Bush. His newest book, The Little Book of E, was published by City Point Press. Recently, Miller was awarded the Furious Flower Award. His collections of poetry include The Land of Smiles and The Land of No Smiles, How We Sleep on the Nights We Don't Make Love, If God Invented Baseball, and When Your Wife Has Tommy John Surgery, and How I Found Love Behind Catcher's Mask. In the introduction to Catcher's Mask, Meryl Leffler writes this about Miller's baseball trilogy. This book is a celebration of Miller's love of baseball. And yet the poems that make up these marvelously inventive and richly evocative books are not about baseball in and of itself. They move into explorations of subjects ranging widely and randomly from one to the other. Childhood, love, desire, marriage, art, music, politics, hatred, racism, the stuff of American culture. In the poem, Losing the Lead and One's Children, the elements of baseball serve up a metaphorical richness, the means for enhancing the feelings of a father whose marriage is coming apart. Leffler goes on to quote the poem, somewhere between first and second, the first bad argument begins like a failed pickup throw. The marriage fails, and then the children have to dust their clothes off. Miller's newly published book, The Book of E, which came out from City Point Books just over a month ago, strikes me as another brilliantly unique work that is essential for our times when our world seems to be splitting itself in two. The publisher writes thusly, in The Little Book of E, Ethelbert Miller embraces the Japanese form of haiku to comment on our contemporary world. Miller's poems follow in the tradition of Basho and Richard Wright. The Little Book of E is a collaboration with translator Rafi Ellenson. Haiku, presented in English and Hebrew, is symbolic of how language can bring people together. Miller and Ellenson have given us a book that shows how Black and Jewish relations can continue to be a beacon of hope. This book is filled with words that blossom like flowers. I'm hoping to hear some word blossoms this evening, and I'm sure we will. Let's welcome this innovative, powerful poet, E. Ethelbert Miller.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm very happy that you quoted Meryl Leffler, because it's very fitting since Meryl Leffler was one of the founders of this Writers Center, along with Al Lefkowitz. Very good to have his name mentioned. Good to see all of you. People I haven't seen in a long time. Some people relocated here. I want to do something different. I found this book on my shelf. This is the Chicago Quarterly Review. Back in 2021, the novelist Charles Johnson was invited by the Chicago Quarterly Review to edit a special issue of this publication. He put together an anthology of Black American literature, everyone from like Rita Dove to David Nicholson, who used to be the book editor of the Washington Post. So it's a really good anthology. But many times, you know, a magazine comes out, you have it, and then you put it aside, like what I did. But then I realized coming here, there are a number of poems in here that I don't read often, and I thought I would share it with you. And you'll see why one poem that's in here I decided to read because my birthday's coming up, and the poem that's in here was my birthday poem that I wrote when I was 70. Okay, so I'll be 74. And the other person who's older than me, older than all of us, is also President Biden's birthday on November 20th. He won't tell you how old he is, but that's another story. Slave narratives. I slip indoors after searching for hours for the North Star. Rumors have been spreading about how a fabulous day is a night with no moon. The problem with plantations is that the pizza driver never comes. Just yesterday, my copy of Ebony was delivered to the big house. Master had a fit. Now I have to hide my Coltrane and Miles records under the big quilt. I hear slavery is hard in the eyes, but a beautiful woman can teach you to read in the dark. And that's a play off of Frederick Douglass's narrative. This is let me read that poem. What does a Black man wish for? I wrote this when I was 70, as I mentioned. You know, my family was gathered around. I had a cake, and you blow the candles out. And then they put those candles on that you blow out and it comes back, you know, and you really feel old. You know, you know, but your grandkids like that, you know, so you're entertaining them. But anyway, I wrote this poem on that day. What does a Black man wish for? You think of Ellison's light bulbs as you stare at the candles burning on your birthday cake. What is the difference between chocolate cake and American apple pie? When a Black man is hungry, he wishes for a job, not food. He wishes for his back to stop hurting. He wishes for solitude when he is seduced by loneliness. When he is lonely, he wishes for love. When the people in the room sing, "Happy birthday," you realize how old you are. You no longer need to count on your fingers because you will never confuse 1950 with 1776. When your eyes first saw the light, you cried because you were being separated from Blackness. You cried while watching your mother's cry turn from pain to joy, her face candle bright. You've always wished for your mother to be well, to light the way with kindness and sacrifice. You wish for your father's Black hands to always be reaching and lifting, and for the future to never be dark. What does a Black man wish for? You wish for everything, even the things you cannot carry. You wish for nothing, so you will not be disappointed. The light from the candles turned blue. You hold a knife in your Black hand, ready to cut the cake. But first, you cut your wishes into small pieces before you blow. Now you blow and blow. And I'm going to read 2 poems that's in this magazine, and then I'm going to read a couple of poems that are part of this series. My friend, some of you like this in terms of writing, where his words come from. My friend is Shonda Buchanan. She's a writer who lives in LA. And she's also written her memoir, which is Black Indian, a memoir. And so I started writing these poems that were looking at the relationship between Blacks and Native Americans. And I used Shonda's link. I liked your name. Like when I saw you, I said, I could cast you as Joan of Arc because of your haircut. I get into things like that, you know? So I like saying the name Shonda. So Shonda's name appears in about 20-something poems. But this is, I'll read you two that are in here and then a couple are in my manuscript. 1865. After Lincoln's death, old people lost their dream. There was only emptiness behind their eye. There were rumors that spread about Africa and the Big River, places where the land gave birth to food and shelter. Tired feet left every morning, and every day we counted a loved one among the missing. It was Shonda I tightly held each night. I buried my face in the center of her back. I held her tighter than slavery. I was a man chained. I searched for the softness of her blackness under her scars and all the false promises of freedom. I loved her like the North Star I could barely see. And this is Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse. I like a crazy horse. You always loved his name. You wish his name was yours. Imagine standing before white people with this name. White people afraid of what you might do. Imagine being Sonny Rollins with an Iroquois haircut, his horn filled with beautiful sounds, his notes high-flying like Bird, who once played Cherokee so fast they couldn't name it. I was talking about the Little Book of E. And there's a number of haikus that are in this book that are not in the Little Book of E. This is haiku from Malcolm X. X marks the spot where the ground opens for a man, a black shining prince. If you think about what we know of Malcolm X, a lot of what we know of how we view Malcolm X actually comes from the eulogy that Ossie Davis gives back in '65. Everything about Malcolm being a man, the black shining prince, all these images that are in that eulogy will turn into posters and things of that sort. But the one thing that's missing from Ossie Davis's eulogy is the fact that he makes no reference to Malcolm X being a Muslim. So the thing that makes Malcolm X is not mentioned in this eulogy. And I go into some of the prisons in the area, and I remember I was up in Maryland. I saw these guys, and I said, you see, the reason why you're here, because you're Malcolm Little. Okay? You guys haven't gotten your X. You guys are breaking into people's houses and stuff like that. And the guys were laughing. I said, see, you guys haven't got your X yet. You're Malcolm Little, right? And so what happened, I said, and you may remain Malcolm Little because if you're going to be like Malcolm X, keep in mind, Malcolm X was celibate for a number of years before he met Betty Shabazz. So you get this transition, but you begin to see the sense of this discipline. But I was joking with the guys who were incarcerated back then because the autobiography of Malcolm X is still a very powerful book that, you know, you can give that to somebody who's incarcerated and it can change their life still, you know, and especially people who have a desire to do what we do, to read and write, you know. I mean, the one person, and I'll say this is for documentation, the one person that Jody Bowles and I published in Poet Law magazine was the writer Dwayne Betts, okay? And Dwayne Betts is well known now for the work he's doing in terms with prison, with the help of the Mellon Foundation, and he's going into prison and building libraries, okay? But he'll tell you that when he received the letter of acceptance from Poet Law magazine, which is here from this Writers Center, he ran around prison, you know, saying like, wow, I got published. And so many people were so happy for him because people are incarcerated, okay? And many times you get guys who are writing, they send letters, and they never get an answer back, right? And the poem that Jody and I accepted, I think it was handwritten, you know, but you could see the potential that was there. And, you know, to change a person's life has a lot to do with what we do here. Keep in mind, there are many people who can't read, okay? Many people who don't have books. And so this is a gift. And as I always tell people, I've never worked a day as hard as my father was. But let me read you a few more haiku poems. There's 4 on this one page. I didn't lay this out. I like to have each haiku have a page, okay? So it can breathe and you work that white space. How lonely my arms, trees walk away from the wind. I now hold nothing. Your hair turns silver, like waves cresting at the beach. Love, endless like sand. Hug the open sky. Flowers bloom when they are loved. The birds are flying. Leap into beyond. The seasons change with each breath. There's nothing here. And people always talk about how I started writing haiku. I started writing haiku because I was writing short poems. And the 2 writers that influenced me back in like late 60s was Langston Hughes and the poet Norman Jordan. Langston started realizing that because he was writing for a living, that he would get paid more if he wrote longer poems. So that's why he learned that really quick. You know, and you think about it, and this is why Langston's life is so inspiring. He made a living from his writing. Okay. And if you look at it today, many of us are attached to, like, you know, institutions, universities, things of that sort. And this is why when you look at Langston here and in the 1950s, the congressional hearings, where he's seen to be very apologetic about the work he wrote back in the 1930s, it's because, you know, at that time, people were taking his books off the shelves like they're doing today. But what happened is, keep in mind that because he's making a living from his writing, that's his livelihood. And so there's a lesson for all of us from there. And that's why it's very neat, is that if you ever go down to Busboys and Poets on 14th and V, you know you're across from the Reeves building, that city building, Reeves building. And Reeves is the lawyer who defended Langston Hughes. So it works very well in terms of Reeves is over here and Busboys and Poets is across the street. But this short poem, you know, how when you're a parent or grandparent, you're not supposed to have favorites. But I like this short poem I'm going to read. And you know, I like this poem. And I'll just read it. It's called Invention. Across the street, Thomas Edison listens to Bessie Smith and decides the blues are too painful for anyone crying alone in the dark. I'll read that again. Invention. Across the street, Thomas Edison listens to Bessie Smith and decides the blues are too painful for anyone crying alone in the dark. And that has a lot to do with, you say, okay, that's the only reason why he invented the light bulb. But he also invented the record player, you know, so it's a playoff of both inventions. And I like that very much. Let me just read you a few more of these poems that are in this series. And then I'll read one last poem that I wrote yesterday. The Dancing Light. Speak their name, Shonda. Crazy Horse, Geronimo, Sitting Bull, Chief Joseph. These warriors once sat outside your door, waiting for the sunrise to say goodbye to stars. What follows war? It's a dancing light, the blinding peace. Blossoms. When I die, I will leave my ghost behind to love you. Our love making will be like mist or fog covering sacred earth. Even with heart blindness, our eyes will touch. I will know you like the first time you undressed and your breasts were blossoms rising to my mouth. Shonda goes west. We knew she was from there and not here. She left us with blues and other things we didn't know how to use. Time taught us the heart was for forgiveness and only now and then for love. Some of us took to burning candles and incense, smoke signals for the lonely. How do you tell someone you miss them? How do you write a name in the sky without rain falling in your eyes? Reconstruction. I touch you to see if you're free or just divorced. There is no ballot in my hands, only desire. Marriage can be a plantation where some still hide the lash. Andrew Johnson was in my dream last night. That should tell you all you need to know. So that's the play on the play. What I'm doing in this reconstruction poem is looking at human relationships, and this is why my baseball trilogy is not just about baseball, like how your wife, when your wife had Tommy John surgery. We're using baseball as its metaphor. When you look at relationships, which are sometimes very stressful, you think about Tommy John surgery, how your arm fails back in the old days, but then because of Tommy John, you take a ligament from your leg and maybe put it to your arm winds up being stronger. Okay, so someone like the Japanese player Shohei Ohtani, he's had Tommy John surgery twice. Okay? At one time, if your arm blew out, that was it. Okay, but with Tommy John surgery, your arm is stronger. So I was looking at this where you have a troubled relationship, you're going to therapy and everything, and maybe something isn't working out. And that's how that's used in terms of Tommy John surgery, so that hopefully what can happen, you can renew your relationship. But that's how I use baseball. In terms of writing, during the times that you live through will challenge you. One person who always talks about me influencing his life and work is Ta-Nehisi Coates, who just has a new book called The Message, which is about his trip to Middle East, to Gaza and Israel. It's been very difficult for me to sort of navigate the last year. I was a Fulbright scholar to Israel a couple of times and have a lot of friends who live in Israel. In fact, I wouldn't have a little book of E, this last book, which is haiku in English and Hebrew, if I had not met, while I was in Israel, a woman by the name of Joanna Chen. Joanna Chen and I immediately became good friends, and we were Skyping, where your literary community doesn't have to be in Bethesda or Tacoma Park or DC. It can be sometimes, somebody in another country. And Joanna and I used to read poems together, Skype back and forth. And then, and she was translating some of my poems into Hebrew. And then I shared some haiku. She liked them. She translated those. And then I said, I'm working on a book. And she said, oh, I think my student, Rafi, would be interested in translating. And that's how Rafi and I became the co-authors of the Little Book of E. And the book is special, not to me, but I think really special to Rafi, because while we were working on it, his father passed away. And so I told Rafi, we're going to dedicate this book to your dad. And I'm really happy that we did this. But then on the other side of my life, I've always been very close to many of my friends who are Palestinian. Naomi Nye, Zaina Azam, I just call it Suhir Hamad, Anan Amari, who was the founder of the Arab American Museum. So what happens, I was always very close to many people who were Palestinian. So when the incidents of the last year, how do you navigate that? I'm checking on my friends who are in Tel Aviv, northern part of Israel also. I'm dealing with friends of mine who are Palestinian who have lost relatives. And so you have to navigate that, and you say, okay, you're a writer, you can't be silent. And so this poem I wrote yesterday, I live outside Gaza. I live outside Gaza. I cannot hear the bombs or screams. I cannot smell death or food spoiling at the checkpoints. I live outside Gaza, where the blue sky is filled with birds, where the sea is blue, and the watermelons and strawberries are sweet. I live outside Gaza, where dreams walk to school, and the mosques and hospitals jump rope while reciting lullabies and prayers. I live outside Gaza, where history wears a broken watch, and memory no longer tells time. There is no war outside Gaza, or refugees fleeing war. There are only invisible cemeteries filled with the broken bones of love. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethelbert. Those were beautiful. It's a wonderful reading. And thank you also for the words of wisdom about Gaza and Israel and other things as well. Thank you. Now we're going to have a Q&A. Karen Allen here, our founder, will conduct it.
Good evening, and we do a quick Q&A at the end, and we always try to be prompt with these things. So I want to ask a question that's based on the quality of the reading that we had tonight, which was so moving and warm. And it's not just the voices that we heard, but also the messages. And so starting with Henry, I'd like them to just say what they had hoped to have you go home with tonight.
Well, with all of my poems, I hope when you're done hearing my readings, I want you to know, I want you to have a feeling of life being a balance, that it is just as serious and heavy and passions just as deep as it is light and humorous. And in there, I think, is where I try to put my poems, and I hope you have that perspective as well, that we live in a world that is both serious, heavy, and profound, and at the same time, light as a feather.
You know, I probably wouldn't have read these poems about Chandra and Native Americans if I hadn't listened to President Biden recently, which I felt was one of his most powerful speeches when he was apologizing for the schools, boarding schools that Native Americans had been forced into. You know, the Pope had apologized when he was in Canada. But when you look at boarding schools, what we think of boarding schools, what it meant in terms of people who were placed in that was very destructive to their culture and their lives. Cutting off their ears and not speaking the language, let alone the sexual abuse. But I think that as a writer, and I like us to reading together because you want to make people laugh. You want to also make sure that people leave here understanding the seriousness of the times we live in, or even the culture we live in. I was thinking about, we were talking about Saudi Arabia, and I was invited at the embassy to meet just with women. It was just like women who complain. We haven't met the author, the writer. And so what happened, we were talking, and some of the women were really very outspoken. And there was one older woman, like a grandmother type, was like, she was not really happy with what some people were saying. And then there was a knock on the door and everybody froze. And I say that because, you know, we're here the day before the election. And when you look at what's happening, maybe we couldn't have this reading in Texas. I'll just take a state. You know, but what happened? You know what happens is that you look up and you have your books there, and somebody says, "Well, those books shouldn't be. You can't sell those books here at the center because of what's in there." And when you think of the books that are censored, it has nothing necessarily to do with sex. Many times it's religion. You know that someone. I mean, you're worshiping the devil on page 5. But I say that in terms of one, we leave here knowing our responsibility as artists, as fellow writers, to make sure that we work with the literary community, that we work with teachers, we work with bookstores, we work with libraries, because they're in the front lines. And don't think that this is a gift. Make sure it's cherished and not damaged. Okay, that's my words.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to ask Ellen to come back and close for this evening. And also want to thank the Writers Center for hosting us. They do a great job in reaching out to writers across the community here. Ellen, you're on, and thank you.
And thank you, Karen. for the Q&A, which was very interesting. And while I'm thanking people, I'm also going to thank Henry and Ethelbert again for a very powerful reading that was moving and fun and heartfelt. So thank you. Thanks also to Karen and the Word Works for sponsoring Café Muse, and to Henry's son, Brian, for doing the tech tonight. Also, I'd like to thank my fellow co-hosts, Luther Judd, Henry Crawford, Majda Gama, Renee Garrity, and Claire McGough for doing so much of the work that allows this program to happen. And we appreciate you so much, our audience, for being here, for watching us on Zoom. You're the reason we exist. If you enjoyed this evening's program, it will be up probably tomorrow on Café Muse's YouTube channel, and you can watch it again or direct your friends to it. And you can extend your enjoyment by purchasing the poet's books from the link. Oh, well, the link that's in the chat, but I'm sure you can find their poems if you look online, their books, and you can purchase them that way. And you can tell other people about the Café Muse series. We'd appreciate that. I hope you can come to the next Café Muse program on Monday, December 2nd, featuring poets reading from the newly released anthology, From the Belly, Volume 2. Poets respond to Gertrude Stein's Tender Buttons, Food, edited by our own Karen Alanier. The program will be in person here at the Writers Center and will also be on Zoom. So everyone have a wonderful evening. Thank you again for being here. And please, if you haven't voted early or mailed in your ballots, be sure to vote tomorrow. This is such an important election. Have a good evening.